Hey, thank you for joining me today as we wrap up this series, Finding Hope When Your World Seems Hopeless. Now, when I've been preparing these messages, I study a number of different sources every week. And for this particular series, I've been leaning heavy on my content from the teaching of Pastor and my friend David Dykes. He has some terrific insight into this book of 1 Peter, and he tells some great stories as well. In fact, one of them is about a man named Jack Sundine, who as a child in 1924 had an opportunity to meet the then President of the United States, Calvin Coolidge. And Jack tells of waiting in this long line at the White House with his father and noticing the president was saying something to every person who shook their hands. Well, as you can imagine, Jack was pretty excited about that, especially about what the POTUS might have to say to him personally. Well, finally, there he was, the president right in front of Jack, extending his hand toward him. And as Jack reciprocated by taking the president's hand, he started listening for those sage words of wisdom. And sure enough, President Coolidge bent down and said three words that Jack never forgot. Guess what they were? The president said to him, to this little boy, "Move along quickly." Isn't that something? Son, move along quickly. Now imagine that. What a disappointment, right? What a letdown. Jack said that it gave him the impression that the president didn't even care that he was there. Now let me ask you a question. Have you ever had someone in your life that made you feel that way? Like they just didn't care about you? Most likely we all have. But here's the good news. The good news is that God cares, and He has some profound words to encourage you in that regard, found in 1 Peter chapter 5. Let me read two verses for you today, verse 6 and 7. Peter says, "Humble yourselves, therefore, under God's mighty hand, that He might lift you up in due time. Cast all your anxieties on Him, for He cares for you." Two short, simple verses, but what a profound message they carry. So here's the word for us today. It is that when you have those times when life beats you up a bit and you feel like no one cares, take heart. God is on your side and God cares deeply. And Peter gives us three reminders of that in these two verses, and I want to share those with you this morning. First of all, God shows His care for you by honoring you. Number one, God honors you. The verse 6 said, "Humble yourselves under God's mighty hand, and in His good time He will honor you." Now, the vast majority of teachers that I've read and studied say very little about the last part of this verse. Most of them tend to zero in on the humble yourself requirement without saying much about the honoring result. And one reason why is because it's a concept that we're not really comfortable with. I mean, we're always told of our obligation to honor God, but rarely do we hear that God will honor us. And yes, there's a proviso on our part, and that is, of course, the humbling of ourselves. But as we do that, Peter says that God exalts us. He honors us, which is no doubt why James would say in his writing, "Humble yourselves in the sight of the Lord, and He will lift you up," or honor you. Same thing. By the way, here's what it means for God to honor you. It means you get God's good stuff. How does that sound? That's what this is saying. That's what these verses are saying. God honoring you means God wants to give you His best rewards, His best results, His best blessings. And you might say, but Pastor, I live a pretty humble life already, but I'm not seeing any of these best blessings you're speaking about. What's the deal with that? I mean, I do what I'm supposed to day after day after day, and nothing ever happens. Nothing changes. Nothing gets better. When will my ship come in? Have you ever said that or thought that? When will my ship come in? Everyone else is getting good stuff. When is mine? And I get this. But I want you to notice this verse says, "In His good time, He will honor you." Now what that means is you will get the blessings you deserve, you'll get the rewards you deserve, and you'll get the results you deserve according to God's timetable rather than your own. And that's not a bad thing at all, because in His good time simply means that God's timing is always the best time and as well as the proper time. So if it isn't happening for you now, be not dismayed, because that just means that in His wisdom, He knows that it's best for you and for His kingdom that you be given honor then rather than now. And by the way, about this humbling thing, one reason this is so crucial to our spiritual life is because it is that which keeps us from being entangled with the worst sin of all. Do you know what that is? It's the sin that caused even Satan himself to fall. It is the sin of pride. You remember the Bible says about Satan that he rebelled against God and said, I'm going to be like you. I'm going to be like the Most High God. I'm going to be God. Pure arrogance, pure pride, correct? You see, pride is that base sin, the root sin of every other sin. In fact, if you were to take a particular sin in a person's life and break that down at the base or the beginning, you would find pride. So if you truly want to live in absolute freedom above the fray, in overcoming power, you must deal with this particular sin of pride. And when you do, humility takes over, and God blesses you with honor. So, when you think no one cares, remember that God cares so much that He honors you. And secondly, remember that God shows His care for you by bearing your burdens. Number 2, God bears your burdens. Verse 7 says, cast all your anxiety, that means your cares, your worries, your fears, your questions, your issues that hold you back and drag you down. Cast all those things on Him, for He cares for you. Now the words cast and anxiety are quite interesting here in this verse. Cast is this energetic word. It's not passive. And it has a couple of meanings. It means to throw or toss, like a bucket of water. Have you been to a car wash before, especially when young people are washing cars, and you pull your car in there and they'll soap it all up, and then they'll have some fun with buckets of water, and they'll throw those buckets of water, toss those buckets of water on the car to rinse it off. That's this idea here. To deposit, to take, it also means to deposit, to take something that you have here and once and for all place it or deposit it there. Like when you get a paycheck and you take it to your bank and deposit it. That's what the word cast means. Then there's that word anxiety or cares, and that simply is speaking about that which tears and divides the heart. For instance, have you ever seen a puppy with a little rag doll? One of our dogs, Bogey, for years had a little rag doll, and he would sleep with that thing and love on that thing and carry it around. But every so often, he would get into a little battle with it, I guess, and put it in his mouth and just back and forth and shake that thing. That's the idea here. That all those worries, we take all of our worries, we take all of our fears, we take all of our anxieties that tear our life and our heart apart, and we cast them or deposit them once and for all, leaving them with God. It's kind of like the man who couldn't sleep, and he got up and started reading the Bible, and he came to Psalm 121, where it said, "He that keeps Israel will neither sleep nor slumber." And so he thought to himself and said out loud, okay, Lord, if you're going to be up all night taking care of things anyway, no sense in me staying up. One of us needs to get some rest. Well, that's just what God says today. One of us needs some rest. And guess what? God would say, it's not me. Give me your troubles and let me do the worrying. Now, someone would say, okay, Pastor, that's all well and good, but it's also a lot easier said than done. I mean, I've tried, but I just can't seem to do that. Well, my response would be, hey, yes, you can. Because listen, like humbling yourself, This is actually a matter of choice. You cast your cares on Him. You decide. You choose. God did not say here, let me reach over and take your cares before they ever become a problem for you, did He? What He said was, when you have cares and worries that divide and tear apart your life, take those things and deposit them with me. You do it. You make the choice. And so it comes down to things like, Lord, you know what? I'm troubled today. I'm fearful. I'm hurting today. But Lord, I choose not to dwell on those anxieties. Today I choose to cast these cares upon you and deposit them into your account. And then, after you pray something like that, I would suggest you memorize and then stand on verses like Philippians 4:8 and stand on it all day long. Paul said in Philippians 4:8, fix your thoughts on what's true and honorable and right and pure and lovely and admirable. Think about those things that are excellent and worthy of praise. Do you remember that verse? What I'm saying is, it's choosing to cast my cares on Him and choosing to dwell on things that are good and godly and a blessing. That is the secret. And listen, this will most likely be something that doesn't happen overnight for you or on your first attempt at it. But if you'll stay with it, it will become a habit. And guess what? Ultimately, that habit then will become a lifestyle, which is the place of real victory. So, when you think no one cares, remember that God promises to honor you. Remember that He promises to bear your burdens. And then the last thing is, He always cares for you. Number 3, God always cares for you. Verse 7 says, you cast your cares on Him or your anxiety on Him because He cares for you. Now, Bruce Gouch says Peter's rationale for why we can cast our cares on the Lord is that He cares for us. And that sounds great and all, but how many of you know it's a struggle to believe that? I mean, especially when your life seems to be falling apart. Like if you were in Ukraine right now and someone told you that, it would be very difficult maybe to get a handle on it. And much of that struggle comes from our failure to really believe God's promises, or at least to believe they are for me. Now, if that sounds like you, let me give you a couple of suggestions. First of all, remember what God's promises actually are. For instance, God does not promise that we will never struggle. In fact, Jesus Himself said, in this world you shall have trouble. You shall have tribulation. But what God does promise is that in the midst of my trouble, He will never leave me alone. He will never forsake me. He will be there. And not just be there, but He will be there to comfort me and to encourage me and work everything out for my good. A second thing to remember about promises and taking God's promises to heart is God's track record when it comes to keeping His promises. And I can assure you His track record is a good one. In fact, it is 100%. He has never not done what He promised to do. Never. Think about your life. Think about the times when, though you would never make it, where you thought you would never make it through that terrible something, right? You had this experience and you were getting ready to walk through it, or you were walking through it, and you said to yourself, I can't do this. I can't make it here. I can't get through this. Yet guess what? Here you are today. Maybe a little skinned, a little bruised up perhaps, but through it all God provided, didn't He? So here's the deal. When you're struggling, remember those times that God came through. Write them down. Read them again and again, and then stand back and watch your faith soar. And by the way, keep that list readily available. And every time God proves His care for you, every time He gets you through and one of His promises come to pass, write it down, add it to your list. And then when you feel the temptation to worry later on, pull out that list to remind yourself that God really does care for you, and He does keep His promises. How many of you remember your child's first steps? Most all parents do. And do you remember how excited you were when that happened? How you called the grandparents perhaps, or your good friends. Oh, little Susie took 2 steps today. Jason walked across the room today all by himself. Guess what? God is a parent just like that. In fact, Job 31:4 says, does He not see my ways and count my every step? Did you get that? He counts your every step and cares for each time you move one foot in front of the other. And something else, as a parent, you never called up your friends or the grandparents and said, my son just took 3 steps today, and then he fell down. Can you believe that? That's not how we do it. That's not what we do as parents. It's not about that. And that's not what God does either. In fact, in Job 14:16, it says, surely then you will count my steps, but not keep track of my sin, my falling, my failures. Isn't that wonderful? God counts our steps, but refuses to keep track of the times we falter and fail. And not only that, no matter where your steps take you in life, God is there, watching, counting, walking. Listen, walking those steps out with you. Your steps may lead you into a hospital room where you sit by the side of a suffering loved one. God counts those steps. Your steps may take you into a funeral home to look at the earthly body of someone that you've loved. He counts those steps. Your steps may take you through a divorce or a heartache or despair. Hey, God is counting every last one of them. Who cares? God cares. He cares so much that He honors you, and He cares so much that He bears your burdens, and He loves you so much and He cares for you so much that He counts and considers and watches over every step of your life. Well, I hope that encourages you today, maybe helps you a little bit in your particular situation in life, or as you pray for the dear people overseas, especially in Ukraine and all that area. I hope this is an encouragement to you. Thank you for joining me today. If I can help you in any way, contact me by email through our website, or you can personal message me on any of the social media venues. I'll get right back to you as quickly as I can. If I can pray for you in any way or help you in any way, I'd be happy to do that. All right, God willing, we'll see you again next week. Have a great one. Bye-bye.